CERT team comes together, someone must serve as the leader.
Once they mobilize their CERT team, they put somebody in charge, and it's up to that person to remain in charge and to give orders. And without that, it's going to be chaos.
In some situations, the CERT team member may become the leader in the neighborhood during a disaster.
This is that treatment area. Now, this area.
A good scenario would be, let's say that there was no other CERT people around, but you were the only person that was trained, and you had to use other neighbors that had no training. You would automatically become the person that was in command because no one else knows what you're trying to do. So they could utilize people that don't even have CERT training and be in charge and tell them what to do and tell them how to be safe. And we do stress that in the class as well, to utilize other people, utilize your neighbors, utilize people that haven't been there, and it just gives you more hands, more people to help out in the situation.
Everybody that takes a CERT program potentially could be a team leader. Now, some people are more prone to do that, and that's fine. So team leaders are either pre-selected or selected at what we call the staging area to take a group or a team and perform a certain mission. It may be to help at the treatment area. It may be to do a search of a neighborhood. It may be to turn some utilities off. Maybe even to fight a small fire with extinguishers.
And though people sometimes are not confident about their abilities, experts say that everyone can play a role in these difficult situations.
A lot of people will say to me, I can't do this work. No one will listen to me. When people are scared, when people have had something happen to them where they need help, maybe they don't tell you they need help, but you know they need help, people will respond to you. As long as you're clear, as long as you are being understood by them, they'll listen to you and they'll allow you to guide them in certain directions. Will you run into speed bumps or difficulties along the way? Sure, but are there ways to overcome it? Improvise, adapt, overcome.
After the CERT team members meet together and become organized, wherever they go and whatever the job they are doing, they need to assess the situation they're in or do a size-up. The size-up is the same approach used by other first responders like firefighters to make sure that a systematic approach is used when dealing with a dangerous and unpredictable environment. The steps involved with the size-up are: gather facts, assess and communicate the damage, consider probabilities, assess your own situation, establish priorities, make decisions, develop plans of action, take action, evaluate your progress.
Secondly, we talk about size up, and that's the idea that you look before you leap. You don't just rush into things. You go out, you look, you think your way through things. You're in an unfamiliar environment, even if it's your own backyard. So you go out and you pay attention. If you find someone who's injured, it's wise to stop and look at why they got hurt before you rush in. For example, if someone was electrocuted and you rush in to help them, you may wind up being a victim also.
The house that looks normal, you walk in, but there's a hole in the floor. The smell of gas, the sound of gas escaping into this enclosed area. You walk outside to take care of utilities and you can't. This is a hazard. Back away. Put some tape up there. Keep other people from that. There are always hazards to be alert. Overhead wires. Can they come down? Treat every wire like a live wire. Move around it. Tape it off or put a rope around it. There's always hazards. Things change. So we constantly look because things can shift. Things can move.
You have to size up your situation. That's the terminology we use. They do a good size up. They check out their scene before they go in. They don't want to rush into a situation because we might have somebody, let's say, injured in a vehicle. But if there's an electric line across the vehicle, then again, we're going to have more patients. They're going to be a patient. They're becoming a patient themselves. We don't want that. If you give a good size up before you start to act and think before you go in there, you have a better chance of staying safe.
CERT team members are always encouraged to take care of themselves and be safe above all else.
Basically, the instruction here to people is that as curious as you may be to see things, be very careful where you go. There is no reason to enter a damaged building unless something vital is going on there. Light damaged buildings should be entered very carefully. Heavy damaged buildings should be avoided at all costs because of the danger involved there. There needs to be a reason why you stick your neck out. There are situations like with electricity. People tend to believe that when the power is off from a disaster, it's off everywhere. We fail to understand that it is the power company's mission to keep power on, not keep power off. So many systems are developed in the grid systems to keep the power running. Well, these can work against us when power goes out, so we have to assume all lines are charged. There are many electrocutions after disaster situations, and so that's a big problem for us.
Seasoned first responders always work with a buddy, and CERT team members are also strongly urged to follow this safety practice.
And we teach the buddy system, so you always want to have at least one other person there. And really that's for accountability issues. If, God forbid, you and I are working and we're searching a building and I go in by myself or we go in together and something happens, there's no way that anyone will know that we need help. And it's really accountability and safety, because we don't want to become part of the problem, we want to be part of the solution.
Going off alone is a recipe for trouble. So we advocate the use of the buddy system, always being with somebody so that something happens, somebody can go for help.
Two pairs of eyes are always better than one. One person sees something that the other person doesn't see. The buddy system has always been there. We use it. Everyone should use it.
Although many people assume that all of the injuries or medical problems occur during a disaster, experts have found that, in fact, a large percentage of injuries and even deaths from a disaster have occurred after the disaster, as inexperienced volunteers try to help out. Because disasters are such dynamic and unpredictable events, and because they can leave the environment in chaos, it is easy for volunteers and people who have been involved with a disaster to become injured.
Well, you're gonna see the things that you would typically see if you wandered through a construction site. We see things like nails through the feet, very common. Injuries from glass, lacerations to feet, a lot of hand lacerations, people reaching down and digging through things and getting cut on sharp metal and sharp objects. A surprising number of eye injuries and head lacerations, because people don't really see they look down but they don't look up, and there's a lot of debris hanging down. We see a fair amount of injuries from power tools that people try to use that they're not used to. Chainsaws and cutting devices that they've never used before. They pull it out, and they borrow it from a neighbor, they're going to cut up their tree, and the next thing you know, we've got another injury. Then you couple that with people often doing a lot of drinking at the same time afterwards, and you've got kind of all the combinations you need there for definitely to have a disaster, a second disaster, as it were.
In a disaster, you could see everything from a patient with multiple fractures, abrasions, lacerations, and they can vary from minor abrasions to grotesque deformities. We see a lot of fractures after a disaster, and those can be simple fractures with just a little bit of deformity to the extremity or the bone, to actual bone ends protruding out of the skin. Major lacerations, as I said, people work with a lot of tools. We see a lot of injuries. Digits may be cut off. Extremities may have severe lacerations. And those are probably some of the more grotesque injuries. Electrical injuries occur quite often, electrocutions, those types of things. And we see some of the minor ones, people stepping on nails, minor lacerations, cutting themselves, and those tend to be the majority of a lot of the things we see.
As a CERT volunteer, safety is your #1 priority. To protect yourself from being injured, you should wear the right protective gear, work with your buddy, follow correct procedures for a size-up, and always be aware of what is going on around you. Realize that the post-disaster environment has many hazards, including debris on the ground and hanging overhead, airborne debris and dust that can get into eyes unprotected by goggles, sharp objects, live power lines, fallen tree limbs, contaminated water, and fires. You can also become injured from lifting heavy objects incorrectly or from bumping into overhead objects that have fallen. Respect your limits. Take frequent breaks. And stop working if you're too tired or exhausted or overstressed. And drink plenty of water to stay hydrated. And remember, all of your training's been designed to keep you safe so you can help others. Here are some injuries commonly occurring to workers in the post-disaster environment. Dehydration, heat stroke, punctures to the feet caused by nails or debris, eye injuries, back injuries, sprained ankles, other sprains, injuries caused by falling debris, cuts, lacerations, bruises, concussions, head injuries. As a CERT team member, you'll also give first aid or medical assistance to others who have been injured. Use the skills you've practiced during the CERT training sessions.
You're going to do what you're trained to do, and we train you to deal with that. If it's bleeding, you understand the ways to control that bleeding. We teach you many different ways of bandaging injuries. We teach you how to deal with fractures and immobilize those fractures. You understand, and we talk about that because there are issues there with blood-borne pathogens, and we want you to protect yourself because ultimately you need to take care of yourself and your buddy.
After a disaster has occurred, the landscape changes. Homes and neighborhoods may be in shambles. The normal landmarks in the neighborhood may be gone, and neighborhood animals may be homeless or traumatized. While neighbors and volunteers may want to take care of stray animals, experts issue a note of caution.
When you come across an animal that's stressed out or traumatized, oftentimes they're going to shy away from you. There's going to be a look of hesitation, and whenever you see that, it's key to understand that that dog may bite out of fear, or that animal may bite out of fear. If ever an animal isn't walking right up to you friendly, I would suggest making sure that someone with appropriate equipment is called in to handling that animal.
If you see a stray dog or a cat, note where it is. A lot of times you're not going to have street signs and things of that nature, but do the best that you can and report that information to the animal control authorities that are going to come into the area and start working it.
Animal control experts know from experience that it is best to be cautious when dealing with an animal that you don't know, because after a disaster, they may be traumatized and act out of fear.
What I would suggest is don't try and read the animal. Just because its tail's wagging doesn't necessarily mean that it's happy and friendly. Most aggressive animals, police canine for example, whenever you see them being aggressive, their tail's going to be up, their ears are going to be up, their tail will be wagging. All indications are you look at them from a distance, that looks like a happy dog. But if you run into it, you find out it's not as happy as you thought.
Good boy. And if a cat or dog bites you, it can be very serious.
Got him. Animal bites are very serious. Typically you'll deal with dogs and cats, and any animal carries bacteria in its mouth. And when it bites you, because bacteria is put into your body. Cats carry a high rate of bacteria. Infection can spread very quickly.